All right, today we're going to unpack one of the biggest shifts happening in business right now, the massive move to the cloud. We're going to look at the data, the strategy, and really break it all down into a story that just makes sense.
So you have to wonder, right? It feels like almost overnight, every big company out there decided its entire future is in the cloud. But what's really going on here? What's driving this digital gold rush? I'll tell you, it's way more than just a place to back up your photos. This is about completely rewiring how business gets done.
And, it all kicks off with a dream. And we're not talking about some fuzzy, vague idea. No, this is a really powerful vision for a future that's faster, smarter, and way more efficient. For businesses, this move to the cloud is like a modern-day call to adventure.
So what is this cloud we keep talking about? Well, at its simplest, it's really just someone else's computer. But here's a better way to think about it. It's less about simple storage and more like renting a piece of a global supercomputer. Any business, big or small, can tap into this incredible power without having to, build a massive data center in their own office.
Okay, so why the big rush? Well, a huge survey of over 800 executives gives us a pretty clear picture. It really boils down to two massive motivations. On one hand, you've got the pull, the promise of incredible new technology like AI and big data. And on the other hand, you've got the push, this intense pressure to just keep up with the competition. It's that classic case of opportunity versus necessity.
So, what's the destination look like? What is this promised land they're all chasing? For these businesses, it's about some really tangible goals: slashing the costs of buying and maintaining hardware, getting a better handle on their data, and maybe most importantly, building a much stronger defense against cyber threats. It's all about becoming more efficient, getting more control, and being more secure.
Right, but you wouldn't set off on a huge journey like this without a map, would you? Or at least you shouldn't. So, let's take a look at how companies are actually planning for this expedition.
And here's the thing, pretty much everyone is on board. A whopping 94% of large companies have already put together some kind of cloud strategy. So the decision to go, that's been made. The real question is, how well have they actually planned the route?
And this is where it gets really interesting. Yeah, 94% have a strategy, but look at how that breaks down. Just about half of them have a detailed, company-wide plan that they're sticking to, but another 45%, they're working with what's basically a rough guideline. It's kind of like half the people on this road trip have a super detailed GPS, and the other half are just working off a napkin with some directions scribbled on it.
Okay, so let's get into the migration itself. How is this actually happening? What digital stuff are they packing up first, and where is it all going? It looks like most companies are starting with the safest cargo. You see the highest adoption rate for internal tools, things that help employees work together, like the company intranet or a shared knowledge base. And that makes perfect sense, right? Start with the low-risk stuff that makes your own team's life easier. Right behind that, you've got the essential support systems. We're talking about finance, customer management software, and HR platforms. Now, these are super important, but they're still not the absolute beating heart of what the company actually sells or produces. But notice this little dip here. When you get to the absolute core of the business, the stuff happening on the factory floor, the supply chain, companies get a lot more cautious. The adoption rate is still high, for sure, but you can feel that hesitation. The stakes are just so much higher here. If something goes wrong, the whole operation could grind to a halt. And this quote really hits the nail on the head. It tells you there isn't just one single destination called the cloud. What companies are doing is spreading their bets. They're putting different assets in different types of clouds. Public ones for massive scale, private ones for tight security and control, or even a mix of both, all depending on their specific needs. So, because everyone's taking a slightly different path, we're starting to see these different traveler profiles pop up. You can actually group these companies into 4 pretty distinct types. And this table just lays it all out for us. First, you've got the Torchbearers. These are the true believers, the pioneers who are all in on a cloud-first strategy. Then there are the Pathfinders, who are moving at a steady pace, always focused on getting real business value out of the cloud. After them, you've got the Defenders, who are a bit more hesitant, often working in separate teams and still not totally sure what the benefits are. And finally, the Spirits, who are kind of just testing the waters, using the cloud for small, specific tasks instead of a big, grand plan. So just for a second, think about it. Which one of those sounds the most familiar to you? Understanding these different mindsets is really the key to seeing that every single company's journey is unique. They all have their own pace and their own priorities. Of course, no big adventure comes without its challenges, right? The path to the cloud is definitely not always a smooth one. There are always going to be some pretty significant roadblocks along the way. And you know what the number one hurdle is? It's the same for pretty much everyone, across every industry. The single biggest obstacle is dealing with the old stuff they already have. Outdated technology that is just incredibly difficult to connect to the modern cloud.
So, what's a legacy system? Just think of it like that ancient, clunky, but super important boiler in the basement of an old building. The whole place still depends on it, so you can't just rip it out. But trying to connect it to a brand new high-tech elevator system, it's a massive headache. It really is like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and it just slows the whole process down.
And if that wasn't enough, there's another huge dilemma. Which path do you even take? Almost half of companies are leaning toward a private cloud because they want more control. Around 29% prefer the public cloud for its unbelievable scale. And then you have a growing number who are trying a hybrid approach, hoping for the best of both worlds. So just deciding which way to go is a massive challenge in itself. This quote just says it all, really. It perfectly sums up where things stand. The Great Migration is underway. The ships have definitely left the harbor, but for a lot of them, they're still figuring out the map as they sail, not totally sure about the best way to get to their destination. And that leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. This journey is completely changing the way the world does business, but it's not over yet. So what happens when everybody gets there? What does that new world even look like? And yeah, that's probably the trillion-dollar question at this point.